There we go. Okay. So welcome, particularly newly. What's your name? Tanya. Special welcome. So some of our, maybe you've talked to our Dharma friends here that have been coming along for a little while. So welcome to the club. And if there's, well, it always applies to anyone in this class anyway, that, you know, any questions, when the questions arise, don't feel like, oh, it's not on the topic or whatever. If it's on Dharma, it's on the topic. So we can, you know, have a bit of discussion backwards and forwards. You know, let's not keep it too formal. I don't feel like that. I just also want to say how amazing. Yes, I hope you feel the vibes of yesterday. So not only do we had a Guru Puja here yesterday, I think it's gone down a bit, but we had a Lama of from Chökyi Monastery in near Dharamsala, and along with the very big entourage of the Tibetan community, come, and we did Tara praises and prayers for Guru Rinpoche, Tara for a couple of hours, I think a couple of hours. And what was so, you know, very joyous is this this Lama from Chökyi Monastery. He's been teaching now for 20 years. It's on, isn't it? It's got to put in for me. It's actually for the recording. I think you can all hear me here. Okay. So not only that, but I asked the translator, so how long will Genla be here? And he said, forever. Forever. I don't know what the condition, what the situation is, but it seems that anyway, so there'll be more of these sessions coming up. Just a heads up. I think the idea was we'll do once a month, have together, and I always think we're a Tibetan Buddhist center and the Tibetans aren't here, there's something wrong. So it's wonderful to have them come in and feel at home and feel this is their Gompa and so forth. So coming together, I think, then is a really wonderful thing. So we'll have more of that. So we'll just see where it goes from here. Yeah. Okay. So we're starting on this new topic, Samsara and Nirvana, which is just what it says here in the outline, happiness and suffering. Or actually, it's suffering and happiness. Samsara is the suffering, just so you get it right, okay? Or we might think samsara is. So samsara literally means that cycle of suffering over and over. So just as you can see, if you've got the notes, and even if you haven't, basically we're unpacking the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. So this is, yeah, so I want to say everything all at once. Perhaps I shouldn't. And then on that front page, there's also a whole bunch of recommended readings. So I think I sent out the notes hopefully to everybody yesterday, and you don't have to look at them now, but just to know you've got them there, along with, as we do in the Discovering Buddhism discourse, there are readings that are set by FPMT, so just extra articles to read as part of the program. And as you will see, there's a whole bunch here extra to read, because of course the teachings on the Four Noble Truths is the probably most frequently taught topic. Why? It was the first teaching of the Buddha. Right? The first time the Buddha actually, you know, after Buddha became enlightened and then was requested to teach. And we follow that tradition. We don't teach unless requested. We don't even talk about the Dhamma unless requested. And of course, we say, you know, we don't talk about till someone asks a question. Once they ask a question, we don't stop talking about it. oh, you asked a question, open the door. No, sometimes they just want a little thing, you know, they don't want the whole thing. So in any case, that's how it is. We're not into turning anyone Buddhist or anything like that, as you know. So yeah, this is, I always figure if the Buddha taught this first, then that was the most important teaching, because it's like, okay, teach the most important one first, in case there's no more opportunity for teaching. Fortunately, there were. And we have the 84,000 teachings and commentaries. Well, 108 volumes. I don't know if it's exactly 108 volumes up there. Depends on how they're actually packaged, but generally it's 108. Yeah. So previously, we talked about we towards the beginning of this course talked about the whole graduated path to enlightenment that the Buddha set out, from beginning to end, from wherever we're at now, or even, yeah, where we're at now, to ourselves becoming a Buddha, becoming enlightened. So we can look at that life of the Buddha as showing how to become enlightened. As the Buddha said, I can't do it for you. I can't take away your negativities. I can't implant my realizations. I can't wash away your afflictions, but I can teach you how to do it. I can show you the way. So this we call, following the tradition of Lama Atisha, the graduated path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim. I know some of you have been tuning in with the Lam Rim retreat at Chen Rezig Institute. I was just up there helping out with the retreat there, Lam Rim retreat. And so, and also there'll be the, I'm leading the one in Dayton in late September or October. So they're generally the ones that are the go-to for us for discovering Buddhism, in terms of being one of the, for wanting to fulfill the practice requirements of engaging in the Lam Rim retreat. And of course, the other one, the sort of, can I say, mecca of our organisation. Anyway, going to home base, Copan, for the 1 month course in November, which is wonderfully restarted after COVID. So that as well. So that, you know, it's to, first of all, we get the teachings, and we said, okay, we develop the wisdom of listening, knowing how to listen. So we get the teachings, then we reflect on it, discuss it, contemplate it from all angles, read commentaries, watch other teachings on that topic, and then meditate on that. So the 3 wisdoms. So many years ago, when I was just sort of starting to get teachings, and when one of my Dharma friends who, you know, started off around the same time getting teachings, and I was going to a teaching on the 4 Noble Truths, and she said, I've had that teaching. I don't need to go to that. I've had that one. It was just like once. So again and again and again. So more and more it soaks in, as the Dalai Lama says, many teachings, many times for each teaching, with many fellow students, from many teachers. So you get different nuances, you get different examples, stories, you get different, perspectives, but it's still the core teachings, never deviates. And then with many fellow students, so we can discuss, and, well, you know, that happened to me last year, blah, blah, blah. So we're able to connect it with our lived experience, make it part of our lived experience, okay? So this graduated path to enlightenment that comes along in, well, here, as it says, 3 scopes, small, medium, great, or middle, great. So this is, as Lama Tsongkhapa said, it's the path to enlightenment as the Buddha taught, for one individual, you know, the practices. So we've covered the topics up to here on the small scope. So we did up to karma, all about karma last year, and then we had establishing a daily practice, you know. And so now with the middle scope, generally all of the middle scope is teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So the goal here is to do what? The goal is to be free of samsara and experience nirvana. So these are not places, these are states of mind. Samsara and nirvana, it's all about our inner experience in exactly the same place. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche said to Nick Rebush, who set up the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, all our transcriptions of all the Lama Yeshes and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings, he talked about this time when he was with Lama Zopa Rinpoche at Swayambhanath Stupa, looking down, and Rinpoche down into the street below. So Swayambhanath Stupa is like a natural crystal stupa. Oh, yeah, our little stupas over there, and that to come as well. Our stupas. Inside Swayambhanath Hill. I'm sure we can call it a mountain because it's in the foothills of the Himalayas, which are very tall. And it's not so very tall until you go up all the steps, and then it feels very tall. Anyway, so naturally in there. And so they were up the top and looking down in the street below. And Rinpoche said, "What do you see down there?" And he said, "Oh, mangy dogs, and people yelling, and dirty pollution, honking cars. You're getting the picture, not very glamorous." And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, "I see a pure land." So, in other words, his experience was something that was delicious. So it's not that we can't see what's going on down below, but that idea that with our mind we can transform every moment of our experience. This is what this whole module is about, really. We can transform it from a moment of experiencing suffering to a moment of experiencing bliss. Okay. Just a bit of work to do in the meantime. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama responded to this question: how can we perceive or know the fact of cyclic existence? So when we say cyclic existence, samsara, cyclic existing, circling in samsara, it's the idea of a continuity of lives, past and future lives. Right? So how do we know there's past and future lives? And that becomes a huge debate. And so, because I think most people in the world are living this life as if it's the only life. Buddha said, "Oh, but no, beginningless lives." Well, how do we know? So His Holiness responded, this is difficult, okay, given there's a continuum of mental and physical aggregates. So mental and physical aggregates is our body and our mind, a continuum of that are under the influence of contaminated actions and afflictive emotions. When we say contaminated actions, that means our negative karma and non-virtuous karma. We do have virtuous karma, we do have neutral karma, but the non-virtuous or the negative or the ones that then becomes, the hotbed for all our disturbing emotions. It's okay. Oh, I can hear myself echo.
Sorry, check with the...
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for checking. So, so that, the negative karma that we say, all our karma propels us into existence, not necessarily negative, because look at us here. Here we have the best conditions for studying the Dharma. We have an interest in that. And so this is all the very ripening of a lot of virtuous karma, a lot of merit that we've accumulated from past lives, making, stainless prayers, but, to probably said, like we say in this life, may I have a precious human rebirth, perfect human rebirth, having all the perfect conditions to study the Dharma, to have authoritative gurus, the real deal, not the fake ones, and be guided by them. And so, like that. And the freedom that we have to do that, and being born in a place where we can have access not only to every Buddhist teaching, but also, from whatever tradition in many different languages, in Australia, but also having the freedom of the leisure to be able to do that, having the time and, or making the time in our lives so we have that. Many different conditions coming together. But when we have a moment of anger, a moment of jealousy, a moment of pride, these are the disturbing emotions, the afflictions that, or deluded states of mind. They're all based on the deluded state that completely obscures reality, and we get terribly confused, and then we do regrettable things. So this is the ripening of negative karma, that bit. Right, to perceive or know the fact of cyclic existence, one must understand how contaminated actions and afflictive motions come to be. Like, where does that come from? To do this, we understand how an unbroken continuum of that exists. In other words, our mental continuum, our subtle level of mind, goes back life to life to life to life previously. And so on the basis of this moment of experience, is a mental moment of all experience of mental moments. Where does that come from? A previous mental moment. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble today. A previous mental moment. Maybe I just say like that. Previous mental moment. Okay. And so we can also track that forward into the future, because right now I can be projecting into the future what I'm doing later hasn't happened yet. Next moment. And sometimes what actually happens matches with what I planned, and sometimes it doesn't. But nonetheless, we go forward. So the idea that, we have to establish using reasoning that there is continuum of our mental consciousness. And we looked at that more in looking at the module on karma. And beginningless consciousness, beginningless lives, and how the negative emotions right now, our disturbing emotions, destructive emotions, give rise to suffering, which is not what we want. We want happiness of every kind. And all of this, the root of all of this is having a mistaken, we say consciousness, awareness of how things exist, or the nature of phenomena. So that's what we're looking at here. So here, as part of this module, then we look at the 12 links of dependent arising, 12 links of dependent origination, which describe exactly how we're thrown into a new cycle of existence, and what are so let's say the main reasons for our existence is our grasping at existence, wanting to have a body, being attached to having a body. I'm very attached to having a body, believe me. Don't want to be bodiless anytime soon. Or not even bodiless, but I want to have a functioning body, that, in other words, it's alive. I don't want to be carrying around a dead body. and carry on the light. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're all very touched to that. Okay, so then as part of this, we look at, those 12 links in great detail, the root one being the ignorant, on the basis of root ignorance. Then we have the craving and grasping, and that has brought us into this life. And I'd say we did a pretty good job in this life. As I was saying, all the conducive conditions for us to be here. So that would have then argued that at the time of our previous death, we had virtue arising in our mind. So this is what we want to aim for, have the best possible mind at the time of death. And given that death's going to come, we want the best possible mind all the time. The most virtuous state of mind, the most positive, the most beneficial, because in any case, the most positive state of mind is the most feel-good mind. Why would I want to be in the grip of anger, which is a very disturbing state of mind? Can't sleep, plotting the revenge, making other people unhappy. I'm unhappy, they're unhappy. Nobody feels good. It's toxic, isn't it? Okay. All right. So that's what we're doing here. So when we say happiness and suffering, or it should say suffering and happiness, the Four Noble Truths, because the first two truths the Buddha taught were about suffering. And my friends say, you Buddhists are such a morbid lot. You're always talking about suffering and death, Well, no, we're talking about the facts of life. Right. So in terms of the happiness side, because the happiness is what we all want. Sukha in Sanskrit. Sukha. So when I hear sukha, I always think sweet. I always think sugar. I mean, sugar is not sugar. Sukha, it's sweet. We do when we have the Guru Puja and Maho Maha Sukha, we taste the delicious nectar. It does have a great Mahasukha, great bliss, great bliss. Okay, so just to be clear what happiness is in the Buddhist context. So when I was over East, the Centre of Vajrayana Institute, we started decades ago with the Happiness and Its Causes conference, which is like the third and fourth Noble Truth. And I always thought happiness and its causes, if we lived up to that PR and people walked away with happiness and the causes of happiness, that would be the end of the conferences. But people kept coming back year after year. So they were still looking for happiness. Whole industry of looking for happiness. So the main happiness that people pursue in this life is the happiness based on satisfying the senses, of beauty to the eyes, of the most delicious tasting food, drink, whatever we're coming in through the mouth, beautiful smells, or the most gorgeous perfumes, or flowers, and nice sounds in the ears, or the most, beautiful music, and, lovely voices that are just like elixir to our ears, etc., whatever, or out in nature, or the beautiful sounds of nature, everything nice to touch. So when I was over East, I'd lead this, we'd have all these from the centre. People wanted to have virtually, can you lead a session in our suburb? Preferably in the street, but in the suburb at least, no. So we have outreach groups, meditation. And so one of the groups was in Tibet. It was called Tibet Gallery, or Tibet Sydney. Maybe it was called Tibet Sydney. And it was a shop that sold Tibetan carpets and the most gorgeous silken garments. And so when people came to meditate, because the people in the shop, this is what, I guess it's the same with Persian carpets, but it's that you actually you roll out and try the carpets before you, it's not like wrapped up in plastic and, you know, don't damage the carpet. So the first thing people do, I say, invite people to lie down, and then they lie down on these beautiful carpets and very lush carpets. But also as people would come in or go out, they'd be just sort of touching all the items or the silky items. And we want the beautiful touch. So that was the sensory meditation, perhaps. And most of us spend our time in sensory meditation. But so we don't call this true happiness because it only lasts as long as that experience lasts. And if we have too much of the experience, then we get oversensitized. No, it's sort of like jarring. Or in terms of food, you're overeating, you know what too much chocolate cake can be not good for you. And I say that as someone who doesn't eat chocolate cake. I'll just say, I use the chocolate cake examples. Anyway, I did so much that at Chenrezig Institute, someone bought me some chocolate cake. Anyway, it was gifted on. Share the love. Most people can't resist. So this is not the one that we're talking about in terms of seeking true happiness, lasting happiness, because if it was lasting happiness, every single moment of that chocolate cake or that sensory feeling would only enhance our bliss and get more and more blissful, more and more blissful, more and more blissful. Do you know that's not the case? You know that after the second slice of the chocolate cake, it starts to feel very uncomfortable indeed. Or maybe you're more resilient than 2 slices, but still at some point you'll be like, too much chocolate cake, I never want to see it again. Right? Or who wants the cake? Just pure chocolate. Whatever. So we know that whatever is an experience of pleasure changes into an experience of suffering, as we say. So not that one. And then happiness of supreme bliss. So there's different levels of this bliss factor, which is like, what is this bliss thing? An experience of joy or delight is probably the closest to what we can say. We talk about physical bliss and mental bliss. So the physical is a sense of more and more feeling a lightness of being, a pliancy, in other words, flexibility, lightness of the body. So, for example, when I first started going to Lamrim retreats at Chenrezig Institute when I was a student and Ken Rinpoche Geshe Tashi Sareng was teaching, and he'd come in and go up the steps to the teacher's throne. It was a bit much higher than this, going up the steps. And it looked like he flew down to sit. It was like the body just arrived there. So that sense of lightness of being, is a tall man, and just that sense of lightness. So I don't know what his internal experience is. And these days, Ken Rinpoche unfortunately had a stroke, and his body is experiencing a lot of, a little bit, not entirely bedridden, but quite a bit at the moment. He still was able to teach a little bit. His voice came back strongly. He was able to teach a little bit, but not very long. So, of course, all the Geshe students are very, very happy to teach, but also caring for the whole body. So anyway, here we have this unpacked as what's called the sublime abiding or sublime abode, sometimes called the four divine viharas. So that we say immeasurable thoughts or immeasurable minds of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So we use those to cultivate those qualities of mind towards immeasurable beings, but that the quality or we could add in all the positive states of mind that are immeasurable. It's not like there's a limit to how much love, kindness, compassion can arise. As Giles Solomon said, we're hardwired for compassion, can't help but help. So it just, we learn to extend that out to more and more beings, out from ourselves, family, friends, out to others that we're not maybe even aware of yet, and then including the difficult ones that we don't want to include. But that's the practice. Joy, equanimity in this sense is having a sort of, there's two senses. One is having an even state of mind, a mind of equanimity. But also in this sense, it's one that even regard, like the Buddha has an even regard towards all beings. In other words, equal love, equal compassion towards all sentient beings, not bearing to see their suffering, wanting them to be happy. So we're cultivating that on the basis of, in that way, we're all the same. In that we don't want to suffer and we want to be happy. So that's the way in which all beings are the same. But as human beings, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, physically, mentally, emotionally, as human beings, we're all the same. And this is why the Buddhist teachings are so relevant today, because none of those things have really changed physically, mentally, emotionally as human beings. I mean, we recognize, oh, that's not a human being. I mean, there might be some slight differences, male, female, intersex and whatever, but we're basically, this is what it is to be human. Yeah. And particularly emotionally, we get all those different emotional states. Even, when we're looking at them and saying, well, what affliction, what toxic state of mind is the one I most have difficulty with, right? And there's some that I don't. And then I have to think, am I in denial? For example. But it may be that the others are just obscured because I'm so good at some negative states of mind because I've practiced them well in previous lives in this life, and they come unbidden. Anyway, so the opposite. So we practice the opposite states of mind because they are in our nature. They are natural to us, and we develop them more and more, and that gives us more and more power. A state of joy, a state of loving kindness, a state of compassion, and even regard. It empowers our capacity, our sense of our resilience. We develop inner resilience, but of what we're capable of doing. So they're very powerful states of mind. They're what we're wanting to develop. And then there's the happiness of a unified mind in meditative absorption. So in this way, you can say that's a ripening of neutral karma. So it can be virtuous, non-virtuous, generally, if combined with virtue, which it usually is, of abiding in these states of meditation where it is like you're abiding in bliss. So this, what we call Nirvana, is said to be like I'm pausing because it's like eternal, well, actually, it's not actually eternal, that's the whole point, state of bliss. So we could say this is the aim of the middle scope practitioner, to have this state where you've, achieved, we previously talked about achieving the culmination of calm abiding meditation, of having your mind calm, having it calm of all the afflictive states of mind, and not only that, having purified our mind of all the negative states of mind. Wouldn't it be great to think, that a negative state of mind, well, it is great to think, will never arise in my mind. There's no such thing anymore. I've purified all that, detoxed the mind, crystal clear, done the deep cleanse and uprooted that root ignorance that leads to all the others, the ignorance of not seeing reality as it is. Therefore, I've had that direct perceptual realization of emptiness and abide in that state, which is said to be a state of enduring peace. That's what Nirvana means, enduring bliss. So you could stay in that state, it says forever, but then I think, no, at some state it said that a Buddha comes and taps you on the shoulder and say, enough bliss and emptiness already, get up the path. You've got to become a Buddha. So we'll all end up that way. Just, yes, Tim. Karma, karma, we could say different ripening of different moments of karma influence absolutely every moment of our experience. So including in meditation. So if say I'm doing calm abiding meditation on the breath. First thing that happens is, I settle the body posture, etc., settle into, okay, now I'm going to focus on the breath. Oh, my mind went out the window. Now I'm going to focus on the breath. Oh, I fell asleep. Now I'm going to focus on it. Stuff happens, right? Because I'm not used to that. What I'm used to is going out the window, getting distracted and so forth. So that distracted mind is a non-helpful mind to a degree, right? It's not necessarily a negative in terms of a harmful state. It is harmful to our meditation. But yes, because we haven't trained in that. So we'd say anything like take anger. So I might sit there in meditation and at some point, for no reason whatsoever, except I've habituated my mind to anger, I start to feel irritated. You start out meditating and the irritated mind says, they've forgotten to ring the bell. Or I'm annoyed with the person behind me, beside me, or whatever, for no reason otherwise, other than the fact that I'm here, they're there, and got to pick on someone. So those minds arise, and when we're meditating, the training is to notice as soon as possible when those minds arise, and just think that negative emotion. There's nothing valid in it whatsoever. It's just another mental moment. It's like space. And to just let it dissolve back into that space and just like, don't need to go there. Just not going there, not going there. So we're training our mind in that way so that we weaken that arousal. So yes, it influences, but we can also change that. What was that? Well, I'm not a Buddha. Yeah, I'm not a, it could be, but I wouldn't necessarily. I just say, well, if I close the door, the dog wouldn't have come in. Quite practical. So, so yes, there's a ripening karma every moment, but we don't know it. You have, so it's not just one karmic seed that ripens in that moment. So say in one finger snap, 64 moments of karma. So a lot of bunch of stuff that you're both creating and also experiencing. So you have the dog licking you, which I presume is usually a pleasant experience, except for when you're meditating and it's an inconvenience. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about that so much. I just say, yep, close the door if I don't want the dog to come in and lick me, because the dog doesn't know. And sometimes I think, like, back in the day before I ordained and I had a dog, my dog would come and sit next to me. And I just think, oh, isn't that maybe attracted by that stillness? I mean, maybe it's just you are at their vantage point. You're like, oh, that's a lap waiting for me. But didn't sit on the lap, sat next to it. No, no. But you could say, if once one has perfected the meditation ability to stay focused without distraction for as long as you wish, without distraction. The dog could be licking you all over and you're still sitting there. But none of us are at that stage. So we just, that takes going away, doing long retreat to achieve that. So we're not going to achieve it in our daily practice. But you may know that for yourself already, that, you know, meditating, like you say, in the morning and so forth, it certainly sets us up for a better day. The day is going to happen regardless, but how we respond to that is better, right? Regardless, even if the dog licks you, you still think, no, it was worth it. It's a better day. I'm better for it. You know? Yeah. No, if it's too distracting, you know, go and spend a bit of time with the dog, pop the dog outside, and then go, okay, now I'll sit down again. So, you know, dependent on, it's interesting, you know, so just two examples. One, we were at the office of the Dalai Lama in Australia, you know, that doesn't exist anymore, but used to organise His Holiness visits. And a High Lama was visiting, and I used to run meditation for this group. And so on this day, it wasn't a meditation time, you know, in our calendar, but we were there with this High Lama. And so he was sitting there, I think he was giving a teaching. And then the little dog of, you know, that lived there, came over and sat in his lap. And he just kept going. Another time, Geshe Zopa, who some, you know, you've met, was teaching in a centre, and there was a resident cat. And so Geshe said that he had made a deal with the cat and said, you can sit there, lie there on nighttime, but I have it during the day. Only the cat didn't pay attention, so the cat would sit there and looking, when can I angle in? And we're sort of sussing it out. And one day the cat got behind him and lay behind him. Geshe didn't miss a beat. He just kept teaching. And then the cat, you know, as they do, started pushing Geshe. He just kept teaching. He didn't go ninja, which means compassion, by the way. Ninja, this is my time. He just kept teaching, just kept going. So if we can develop that degree of focus, stillness, you know. See, it's easier if a dog just sits next to you rather than looking. You can train it just to sit. But they only ever sit for food, it would seem, or a walk. Okay. So this also I just wanted to mention in relation to these teachings on the Four Noble Truths. So for one to become Buddhist, we say that as a Buddhist, we set the view of the Four Seals. Sansa Khensi Rinpoche wrote a book, I think it's called What Makes You Not a Buddhist. What makes you a Buddhist, and then that's crossed out and not a Buddhist or added in. So there's the belief in the impermanent nature of everything, that everything changes, changeability moment to moment, that having this body and mind, these contaminated, not everything is impermanent. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. So what does compounded mean? It means made up of bits, right? There's this and that, you know, chemists make compounds. So lots of bits and pieces coming together, which our bodies are certainly lots of bits and pieces. And in starting with the egg, sperm coming together, etc. And then makes a lot of other bits and pieces, but also the mind as well is made up of all these mental moments, all these different images, plans, and memories, so forth. I think that, you know, memory, the experience of memory proves the continuity of consciousness. You know, that what it's, you know, as the Buddha sat under that Bodhi tree, the Buddha sat there, and it says in the first quarter of the night saw all his own past lives, and the next quarter of the night saw all the past lives of all other beings. So, and then when I was in New Zealand one time, when Lamazada Rinpoche was teaching, he said the monk who was translating there remembered his immediate past life. And like he'd been talking with Rinpoche, and Rinpoche just came out and said he remembers his past life. Okay. So to do that, even to remember most of this life, it's a challenge. The more our mind does calm and settle, the more we develop what's called the clairvoyances. We hear that, we know that word, right? Clairvoyance, literally clear seeing. That we're able to be aware of more things that were maybe hidden before because obscured by all our blah, 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 blah going on. You know, like when you're having a conversation with someone, but you have to get somewhere in the mind, not really listening. Well, your ears probably are, but your mind isn't. And so it's sort of like, and when you're with someone like that, you just want to let them get away because you feel like, oh, you've got to go and you've got to go. But if you're face to face with someone who, no matter how busy they are, is just right there in the zone with you, really fully present, that's a powerful experience. So for ourselves to practice that, simply being fully present. One breath in and out will do that. One breath with awareness in that. It has to bring in. So, what was I doing before that? Okay. The four seals. So all contaminated phenomena are by nature suffering. When we say contaminated phenomena are by nature suffering, we mean physical, mental aggregates in our body in the nature of suffering. We get that on a physical level, the aches, the pains, the illness, and so forth. And we get it at one level on the mental level, the suffering of loss, grief, the suffering of all the toxic emotions of anger, of jealousy, of pride, and so forth. So we get it at one level, but then in the Four Noble Truths, it unpacks it at more and more subtle levels. So just to, and then the third one is all phenomena are empty. They're empty. What does that mean? Nothing exists? No. All are empty of, because we've said already they're impermanent, so they're empty of being permanent. So I experience the table as permanent. Intellectually, I can interrogate the table and say, well, I know it's made up of parts, you know, the legs, the tabletop, and the nails or the glue or whatever else. And all of that's changing moment by moment. It's made up of atoms, which are made of, which is the smallest molecules, no, atoms, subatomic particles, and then go down, and you know, because science has shown us that it's actually all these subatomic particles and molecules and that whizzing around in space, but our experience of it is still something solid, permanent, reliable. We want it to function like that. Don't want to stop it functioning like that anytime soon. But so with ourselves, empty of what? Existing independent. So it's dependent on all these bits and pieces coming together. And then it's dependent on the tree that grew, and we can track everything that it's dependent on. The same with me. All the bits and pieces of my body are dependent on cells or the subatomic particles of my body, etc., etc. Endless, endless, endless. And then, so therefore not permanent, therefore not independent, not self-sufficient, just sort of babies, definitely not self-sufficient. We rely on, none of us are self-sufficient, just existing from our own side, not dependent. So this becomes a point of investigation. And that's where, like, the Dalai Lama often, when he's teaching the Four Noble Truths, teaches first the two truths. So we have conventional truth, which is how we experience things, let us say, generally. And then the ultimate truth that says it's empty of being permanent, unitary, like I'm a solo operator, being independent. It's empty of those things, of being self-sufficient, self-sustainable, however we want to say that. Existing from my own side. Why is that so important to remember? Because we relate to everything in the world as if it's all out there, nothing to do with me. Chökyi was a great teacher of that. That we could isolate ourselves at home and still get caught. It's very subtle little microbic. I don't know how big it is. I mean, they make it look like this big in all the imaging. And then we go, oh. Microscopic virus. And shows that interdependence of all of us, at least in the human, globally. And so, of course, there's many things these days that we can, investigate how interdependent absolutely everything is every moment. But profoundly, the Buddha also taught about this before science, so because it was his experience of it. So everything's empty of that true inherent existence from its own side by way of its own characteristics. We use all these different terms because the different philosophies, even within non-Buddhist and Buddhist, that hold that thing to be true, like diamonds are forever. I mean, even last night when they asked the translator, how long will Genla be here? Forever. Ooh, forever's a long time. So we could debate that, of course. Yes. Yes. Formless, yeah, definitely. The mind is formless. So, of course, we know the body is form. It's physical. It's something that everything physical can be measured. The mind in Buddhism is said to be formless. It's dependent on the brain, but it's not equivalent to the brain, right? Because if it was equivalent to the brain, when you die, the mind would die along, when brain dead would be mind dead. But we know it can be proved that people experience past lives up to young kids up to a certain age and so forth, that we experience past moments of mind, we project further forward, that there's a more and more subtle levels of mind, which is what goes lifetime to lifetime. And it's not based on the physical body, because the physical body gets left. So this is a debate, particularly now that after a few decades of mind science, it's very new to investigate, well, what is this relationship, mind-brain relationship? So there, like Norman Deutsch is one, the few of these mind scientists, like I think it's Norman Deutsch, whose books like the mind that changes the brain. So they've been able to study how different mind states actually affect the brain. Like, when they put electrodes on here and different zones highlight if you're in deep meditation and so forth. So this is the mind changing the brain, establishing new neural pathways. Because, this mind science wasn't there when I was growing up, and it was like, well, don't get drunk, because every time you get drunk, you're killing more brain cells and they will never be replaced. Is that true? Coming from the doctor in the house.
The needle way.
or or if you've taken those vows, not good to drink at all. So because why? Because regardless of what damage it might do in the world, you might do in the world, how it affects your mind. You know, I had one time, okay, before I took any Buddhist vows when I was working, and I had a lunch, business lunch. When I say business lunch, it's in the sort of work I was doing. It sounds a bit fancy. About an outdoor cafe, but we did have, I did have a glass of wine, and I went back and thought, oh, I've got a couple of minutes, I'll just meditate. And then I went, ooh, and I thought, that's it. That's why you don't have alcohol. Yes. Yeah. Yes. They need that input. Yeah. I tell you what. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, other very interesting thing, because at the very first of our conferences, which is actually called Potential Upper East, Geshe Dawa, who's since passed out, who's our first Tibetan Lama in Vajrayana Institute. So he said at that conference, you know, when the mind science, because the Geshes love the scientists' presentations, they all want to come to the presentations. And it's all very exciting, as you can see with the Dawa Institute dialogues. And so Geshe Dawa said that she'll put the electrodes here, basically get the heart chart. And it's the first time I'd heard that, maybe other people. And subsequently, I mean, it wasn't immediately, but after, because some of those mind science people were at that. And so subsequently, at some point, they did. They experimented here, and they found, like, say you're meditating on love, compassion, there's a response here before in the brain. Right? So how do you explain that? That's not generated from the brain. That mind isn't generated from the experience. Yeah. So there's a lot more still to know, and I think it's very exciting too. But so far, as the Dalai Lama said, more recently, a couple of years ago, with the Happiness Causes Conference, he was being interviewed, Professor Ian Hickey, Mental Health Australia, psychiatry. Anyway, he was, you know, one of those. He's a he was Australian. Yeah, he had all of that, right? Yeah, in the mental health space. And so he asked His Holiness, in all these dialogues, because they've been going on since the mid-80s, what have you learned from all these scientists, you know, physicists and neuroscientists and so forth? And he goes, what do you think? But they've learned a lot from me. So it's, what's exciting is it's proving what the Buddha taught. You know, for those of us for whom we want to have well as close to possible as scientific fact. Of course, we say, well, we can debate the truth of scientific fact, but nonetheless, this is what the world responds to. So they're being able to prove, and His Holiness is guiding them, saying, you know, when they're talking about them, when they were talking about mind as, you know, brain, he just said, do you love your wife with your brain? And you suddenly go, oh, that's an odd thought. Nobody said yes. And what happens if your brain gets damaged? Does your love get damaged? I mean, we could analyze, you know, but so it's exciting stuff. So the fourth one, Nirvana is peace. This is the fourth of the four seals. So Nirvana is peace. So is that mind that's abiding in a state of peace, abiding in a state of bliss. And this is the goal of abiding in a state of bliss forever. This is the goal of the middle scope practitioner. So these days we'd say that's the goal of just in the world these days of the Theravadan path. So at the time of the Buddha, there were 18 sub-schools in the of that tenet system. And so that's the one that has endured. So when I say Theravadan, we can think the Thai tradition, the Sri Lankan tradition, the Burmese tradition, generally. Okay. And I mean, already achieving that state is quite remarkable. At least a countless grade even to do that. Hell of a lot of time. So we don't have to go one by one of eliminating each affliction as it comes along. If we get to that root ignorance, if we can have that direct perceptual realization of emptiness, that's what's liberation, freedom from the toxic emotions, freedom from that. Your mind's completely emptied. And that is that experience of some supreme bliss, a mind in peace. Very much needed in the world, as the Dalai Lama said. If all school kids learned to meditate from a young age, one generation, world peace. So simple, isn't it? But not easy. We say, oh, that's all it would take. And then you think, like I was asking this kid yesterday, it was a kid, teenager, 13 years old. And so I said, did you learn meditation at school? And he said, no. So I was hoping that his generation became more mainstream, but it's still not mainstream. I think, unfortunately, because it's associated with a religion, one does not need to believe in any religious tenet to meditate. You just need to be able to have a functioning mind.
Whatever the mold was, but the young generation,
Yes.
the concept, because it says so many distractions.
Yeah.
So the world in which they operate now,
It is. Yeah. It's, yeah. And so what do we see? ADHD. Difficulty, I mean, I just, the work of a teacher is very challenging, even more challenging. And what does that also affect? And it comes back to maybe not the beginning, but a distracted mind. It's not just for now. Vicky Pot. Difficult to teach, yes. It affects ethics. It affects your ethical conduct, right? So, this is the very first thing that on a small scope we train to abide in ethical restraint, restraining our speech, restraining our actions. And it's like, because these kids don't have those filters, regardless of whether what they watch is harmless or harmful or engaged with, they're distracted. And that distracted mind then causes problems. Just on the basis of distraction causes problems, isn't it? So, yeah, I feel sorry for teachers. Their life would be so much easier if those kids to learn to meditate. And, yeah. And of course, from the kid side, because from a young age, they're being, shall we say, sensory overload. And because I remember going to visit one time my brother who has 4 boys, now young men, but when they were younger, I turned up one time and the 4 of them were sitting there inside on a sunny day at the computers and playing computer games. And that's a normal household, I guess, and doing, you know, it's all this input, input, input. And, you know, getting out into fresh air and taking a break from that just seems to be less and less. And so, you know, then we get things like ADHD, or as you've heard this, as our model says, ADDD, attentional deficit, no, attentional deficit delusional disorder. So not only attention deficit, but we're all just crazy. I'm laughing, but it's nothing to laugh at. It is a great concern. And then you see the state of the world, and you know, there was an organisation that I'm not sure still exists, that it was called Distracted Globe, but it was doing good, you know, humanitarian projects. And I thought, yeah, Distracted Globe is sort of explains it, doesn't it? That the whole world is like. And then you get good at whatever you practice. So those, you know, I mean, I don't know if they talk about it now, but it is an addicted mind, addicted to that sensory input, addicted to that device. You know, when people say, oh, I looked around my house and I could give it all away. And I go, and what about your smart devices? That's the thing. Maybe we could, I don't know, but maybe if you're very young, not. Yeah, we're doing them a great disservice. Really. I hope they still do sport at school and get made to be out and about. There's some schools where they lock away the devices at the beginning of the day. But then you've got the ones for class, but the phones and things. And guess what? The kids' behaviour is much better. You were? Yeah, and? Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah. 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 I mean, there are some schools in the world that are based on values-based education, and that's fabulous. And more about the better. And maybe in a few years' time, might be decades, that might become like so vital that we actually do it. Because, you know, within our organisation, when Lama Yeshe talked about what we now call the 16 guidelines for a happy life, there's ethical values for how we think, how we act, how we relate to others, and how we find meaning. And so basing education on that, called it universal education, to be quite a radical thing in the world if that was became the basis of all education again. And there was a review in the Guardian, was it Guardian Weekly or when it was first presented, and said, this is a fantastic program. The shame is that we have to have such programs, that people have to be taught ethics, because I think in schools, because I think this was something that, you know, a few generations ago, we grew up with those in the family situation. I can't say everybody did. There was much more prevalence of that. And now we just see the world becoming more and more unethical at the high levels. And as the Buddha predicted, what happens as a result of that? Environmental degradation. He didn't use the word global warming, but he might as well have said that. Crops cease to flourish, they're not nutritional medicines aren't effective, etc., etc. All this, that's happening more in the world. Although I think we still have some effective medicines. No, well, we keep creating more effective medicines. So that's a good thing. That we haven't lost that one yet. Okay. So meditate. Yeah, we can say it's effective medicine for the mind. That is what the Buddha said, is medicine for the mind. And remember leading meditation now. So as part of a mental hygiene program in a council setting. And that was great that they had that for the workers, but they had to do it in their lunchtime. And it wasn't like, we will allocate extra time, or one place it was before work, but it was still really good that they had those programs for our mental health. Of course, it doesn't replace, the meditations you need, medication, sorry, medications that you need, still need the medication, but to enable us. But meditation, and there's been lots of studies on the impact of that, of reducing anxiety, reducing, well, I'm not quite sure, it's sort of like maybe tendency towards heart attack rather than heart attack itself. But many illnesses based on the mental state. It's a Buddha called affliction caused illness. So from the disturbing matters of mind, that illnesses can manifest. Okay, ready? So better start looking at, okay, we did start looking at that. So we talked about happiness and bliss. So the Buddha's first teaching was on the first noble truth, which was the truth of suffering. And just to say, when we say noble truths, it's called a truth for the noble beings. It's self-evident to them. These things are self-evident. We have to have it revealed to us, or directed in the right direction. Then we can say, oh yes, of course, that's self-evident. But for them, it's just natural. So when we say them, those Arya beings who do have that direct perceptual realization of emptiness. So they're called Arya beings, higher beings, because they've achieved higher states of mind that can, on a basis of much more subtle level, can see what's happening and going, wake up world, yeah. So suffering, dukkha. So dukkha also has this, that's a Sanskrit for it, connotation of discontent, dissatisfaction, maybe we should just say distracted, all the disses. So it's not necessarily just the physical suffering, it's this mind that's never satisfied, that's always craving, it's always looking for a different experience, a new experience, and so forth. So here the analogy is of a large potter's wheel that screeches when it's spun round. Got any screeching potter's wheels at home? No, he definitely makes sure, because it's not pleasant, is it? It's unpleasant and doesn't turn smoothly. I don't know how potter's wheel squeals. And conveys a sense of dis-ease, disquiet. It's an unsettling. And so, yes, there's obvious painful experiences. That's the most coarse, obvious level of suffering, which we all get. But then we look at, in the Buddha's presentation, we've got more subtle levels of that. So on this very, very obvious level, the suffering of suffering. So in other words, suffering of pain, suffering of grief, suffering of loss. So it's either a physical suffering or a mental suffering. It's a suffering of that suffering. Unpleasant experiences in our body and our mind. We all get that. Ants get that. Dogs get that. I mean, you watch these, like, I've been watching ants lately because I just happen to be surrounded by them. And even if you're trying to help them, because they always occupy the water basin, and I always worry about them drowning. But then when I was at Kopan one time, they got into my apple juice, and even though I had thought tightly closed the bottle. I came back, oh, so much for your Dharma practice. You just killed all these ants. But then I followed the toilet paper and spread it out and put all the ants on there. And actually quite a few of them came back to life. So, and then mantras, prayers, taken outside. So, but yeah, I was relieved that quite. So I'm not sure. You have to study ants a bit more closely. I always think you're going to get drowned there. You need to move. Sometimes they do move of their own accord. Here she comes and move out the way, but not always. So we all get this level of suffering. We all understand it, whether it's aches and pains or diseases within the body, whether it's just an unpleasant feeling within the body, or for any of our senses, we don't like the unpleasant. So that becomes a form of suffering. You know, oh, that loud music. Or, we eat something disgusting, we hopefully shut it out. There is a bit of survival in there. But yeah, anything that's unpleasant at all, we don't like it, even the slightest discomfort. And so, yeah, all the basis of that is the basis of having these, as we say, contaminated aggregates. We say contaminated because, say, the Buddha has pure aggregates, so that when we purify, we create the causes to have a Buddha body, which is that body of light, and it doesn't have all these clunky bits to have aches and pains and break in it. And so then we look at the suffering of change, which is what we we're talking about before, the chocolate cake, something that's pleasant to start with, but then it becomes very unpleasant. Or even you're having a nice, comfortable time sitting here. But if you were to sit here for the next 24 hours, just the thought of that in your mind is already giving you aches and pains, isn't it? Right? Just the thought. Hasn't happened. It's only a thought. See how our mind can influence us so easily. So, as the Buddha said, if that was a cause for happiness, the more you sat there, the more the cake, etc., more and more bliss you experience. So because that doesn't happen, innately, it's a cause of suffering. So innately, it's already a cause of suffering. So then when I say, perhaps 24 hours later, stand up, you experience the bliss of standing, then that becomes our sense of happiness. But actually, it's a mere reduction of that suffering of sitting. It's now the suffering of standing. So you don't get that. You don't get it with the chocolate cake, and really the shops don't want you to get it with the chocolate cake. So they go out of business. And coffee. So I did read that people only ever experience the first sip of coffee. Right? So we do have all these meditations on, well, I haven't done one on coffee. Sort of feels a bit counterproductive. It's up, down, up, down. But on something like, conventionally it would be a grape, but I tried it out with kids with chocolates. And so I had a bag of chocolates and passed it around and said, take as many as you like. Of course, they've got quite their nice little mouths. Now we're going to meditate on chocolate. And so it was just one little chocolate. And then by the time you smell it, the aroma already, juices are flowing. You feel the texture. And put it in your mouth, you feel the texture in your mouth. You go through the whole sensory experience. And so all of that is quite blissful. And guess what? They didn't even want to take the next chocolate. So we don't really experience, if we fully experience those things, we would always experience the satisfaction. Rather than, need another one, need another one. Because we fully experience things. Be a very different relationship. So that is by nature suffering. It's just that we keep looking for more and more and different pleasure experiences on the basis of the senses that are going to provide us with some sense of bliss, happiness. Of course, enjoy it while it lasts. But the thing I don't get is when people say, you know, the chocolate thing, oh, I shouldn't. I'm just like, that's ridiculous. Either you're not going to have it, but if you're going to have it, enjoy it. Just enjoy it to the max. Makes sense. Oh, okay. Well, we're sort of coming to the end of our time. Okay. Oh, no, maybe I'll just, no, I won't. I will leave that one for next time. That it's not just a quick one, because that's the most subtle level of suffering. All right. Okie doke. Just thinking if there were any other announcements to make. Not thinking of any. We can dedicate. Page 16. Just turn this one up.